Having old game consoles means having old controllers, and having old controllers often means broken or missing parts, frayed cables, and a whole bunch of other issues that can't always be easily fixed, or in some cases, can't be fixed at all. But thankfully, in the year of our Lord 2024, we have plenty of options for aftermarket third-party controllers to fill those gaps. For most systems. For the TurboGrafx and PC Engine, our options have always been pretty limited. Old Skool's and Hypkerkin's TurboPads have been available for a few years now, and I did a video putting them head-to-head a while back, but to summarize, I much prefer the Hyperkin one. Old Skool's is alright, but the shallow run and select buttons and much shorter cable make it the lesser choice overall, especially considering how they're both about the same price, usually coming in at $30. We have a couple new contenders now though, namely Polymega's 6-button controller and the arcade-style controller from RetroMods. Both of these caught my interest because they both bring something unique to the table. In Polymega's case, as far as I can tell, they're the only company currently making and selling a modern aftermarket 6-button PC Engine controller, letting you play that handful of 6-button games like Advanced Variable Geo and Street Fighter II properly without the exorbitant cost associated with getting an original 6-button pad from some random dude on eBay. Meanwhile, RetroMods, who sells arcade-style controllers for just about every system ever, also has a TurboGrafx one, which again puts them in a unique spot of being a modern alternative to the original Turbo Stick, which is an increasingly rare and expensive item. First, let's check out the Polymega Pad. Now, if you're not familiar with it, the Polymega is an all-in-one retro console. It lets you play a ton of different games from several different systems, all on the same device, and you can use your original controllers or theirs, and I've always thought it was a really neat idea. And I've been sort of on the edge of buying one for a while, but when they recently raised the price of the base unit to well over $500, I pretty much checked out at that point. However, it did dawn on me that they do sell their controllers on their own, and they're reasonably priced, and people seem to like them well enough, so I figured what the hell, I'll give their $30 6-button PC Engine controller a shot. Looking at the pictures of it did have me a little bit concerned from the very square form factor, like maybe it's gonna feel like you're just holding a VHS tape, but I was pleasantly surprised with how comfortable it is when I finally got it. Dare I say, it might actually feel a little bit better than the Hypkerkin Specialist, and I really do like that one. This one's got a little bit more weight to it though, and just feels a little more solid and premium. Like the Specialist though, it's got a long cable, which I appreciate, and it's that nylon style, which is a little bit easier to wrap up and store. Unlike Hyperkin's and Old Skool's pads though, Polymega's controller defaults to the PC Engine style port and annoyingly does not include an adapter. That aside, I really like this controller. The buttons ditch that concave shape that every other one of these controllers use for a flatter surface with a very slight convex shape. Kinda reminds me of PlayStation buttons, which I'm also super used to, so that's fine with me. They're clicky and responsive, and I like them a lot. Maybe a little bit big, but that's okay, I like them. Something else I immediately noticed is that the turbo switches do not have the middle setting, which I guess is fine. It's certainly not ideal, but I also can't really think of any games where I actually prefer the middle turbo setting anyway. Perhaps there are some moments where that might be preferable, but I genuinely can't think of any, so I doubt most people will ever really miss that. They also smartly included a toggle switch to put the controller in 2-button mode. This is a great idea because it lets you continue to use the controller even in 2-button games, which experience a lot of weird glitching and problems with 6-button controllers. I never understood why, but that's just the way a lot of them are. So, as long as you remember to flip it to 2-button mode, you don't have to worry about that. The home button here, of course, has no real use outside of the Polymega system, but it does seem to function as a run button in most games. Though sometimes, like here in Final Blaster, it seems to work the same as pressing up on the D-pad, which is strange, but there you go. Speaking of the D-pad though, this controller's D-pad is outstanding. It's really tight, responsive, and has just the right amount of give for me to feel extremely in control when playing precise platformers like JJ and Jeff, and when quickly flying around in shmups. Unlike the other third-party controllers, this took absolutely no time to get used to. I slipped into using this D-pad immediately. It's awesome. I might even like it more than the original D-pad, which, I don't know, it's hard to say, but the fact that it's even comparable to the original one is a very good thing. Now, one thing I really don't like about this controller is that the run and select buttons are bafflingly up at the top and well out of the comfort zone of my thumb, while the turbo switches are on the bottom. Why they did this completely backwards is beyond me, but it's basically impossible for me to get used to that after 30 years of muscle memory. This is particularly problematic for games like Bloody Wolf and Legendary X2, where the run button is an action button and select is used to pause. Thankfully though, while in 2-button mode, button 3 functions as a run button, which is very easy to get used to since it's to the left of button 2 like the run button should have been. And button 4 also seems to work as an alternate select button, which is a little bit weird, but I can deal with that. Now, I can't say with 100% certainty that this works in every game since I haven't tested every single game, but in the dozen or so games that I did test, it does, including Bloody Wolf and Legendary X2. And if it weren't for button 3 and 4 doubling as run and select, this controller would have taken a significant hit. So I'm glad it dodges that bullet because I really do like everything else about it. Seeing as this one is roughly the same price as Hyperkin's and Old Skool's controllers, I do recommend it with the understanding that you're either going to be using it on an actual PC engine, a Duo, or you're willing to get an adapter for your Turbo. The fact that it opens the door for those 6-button games at a fraction of the cost of an original 6-button pad, while feeling great to hold and sporting that really nice D-pad, I'd say the positives here far outweigh the negatives. If you're looking for a modern PC Engine controller, for most folks, I think this is probably the one to get. And if for some reason I do end up with a Polymega one day after all, I'll be that much more ready for it. Alright, over to the arcade stick world. As of now, as far as I can tell, you basically have two options. The original official Turbo Stick, which is well over 30 years old, isn't super well made in my opinion, and you have this bad boy from BD RetroMods, which also is not what I would call cheap, but it's not 30 years old and it is very well made, at least as far as I can tell. The first thing you'll probably notice here is the arcade-style joystick and buttons that do make it feel like an upgrade from the official Turbo Stick. The form factor is about as straightforward as you can possibly get. It's a big block with an arcade stick, a couple switches, and some buttons. That's it. Though what it might lack in panache, it definitely makes up for with nailing the fundamentals. The stick itself in particular gives you those nice clicks when you move it around, as opposed to the official Turbo Stick, which just gives you the creaking of the cheap plastic. This one is also extremely grippy with little pads on the bottom that seem to prevent slippage almost entirely. As you can see though, this is a far more stripped down and minimal device than the official stick in terms of features. The turbo sliders and slow-mo button on the original stick are not here, nor are the middle turbo settings. Like the Polymega controller, your turbo setting here is either full blast or nothing at all, which again is not ideal, but I guess it's okay. And I do rather like the large switches that kind of make you feel like you're operating a spaceship or something, which is fitting I guess, since you're probably going to be controlling a spaceship of some sort when you're using it. Now what does concern me a little bit is the somewhat inconsistent polling rate. In certain games, like Bloody Wolf here, you can plainly see the rate at which the turbo function fires off seems to oscillate around just a little bit. Compare that to the more consistent rhythm of an original TurboPad. It's not something that's ever thrown off my gameplay, but I do notice it from time to time, so I think it's worth mentioning. Also, the run and select buttons are a little bit out of the way as well, on the opposite side of the switches from the buttons, and I'd probably prefer that to be the other way around for easier access. Though if you're in that arcade stick mindset and you're using your entire hands, this is not as big of a deal as the awkward run button placement on the Polymega Controller where you're just using your thumbs. Your mileage may vary, of course, but that's just how it feels to me. BD RetroMods will also let you customize your colors too. Of course, I chose purple buttons and a black stick, but if you message him on Etsy before purchasing, he'll hook you up with whatever you want. He also includes an adapter that will have it working on a PC Engine and an analog Duo. Given that this arcade stick and the original are similarly priced, I think you could logically go with either, and I'm glad that I have both. The official arcade stick has those bells and whistles that give it a nice novelty, but the BD RetroMods arcade stick feels like a higher quality arcade device that will almost certainly be working just fine many years after my official one has finished disintegrating. Now, if you've tried these options, feel free to let me know what you think about them down in the comments, and if there's another option that maybe I haven't mentioned yet, also feel free to bring that up. Hopefully we can make this video and the comments below it a resource for people going forward. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.